Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 9 of Late Nights with Christ. I want to talk very openly with all of you today and kind of just speak from the heart. It is no secret that I have been completely MIA for the last 2 months, and I want to explain why. So if you have watched my last video, you would know that I had told all of you that I would start posting consistently on here and that you will be seeing a lot more of me because I fell back on my relationship with God and things just weren't good. And I knew that I needed this because the whole reason I started this is because whenever I speak of God's ways, I always feel closer to Him. You've all heard it before, you know what I'm saying. And next thing you know, I am completely just gone from YouTube. And I want to explain all of that today in this video, while also just talking about relationship with God in general. I want to make a promise to all of you today that I'm going to stay for good. But this time, I don't want any of you to take my word for it. I want to prove it to all of you. And I'm not saying this out of motivation like my last video when I said that I would be consistent and I would continue posting. I'm saying this out of a need for God, honestly. Lately, I have been pretty good with God. However, it wasn't always like that. A few months ago, I had gotten into a relationship. My very first relationship. I'll spare you the details, but just to sum it up, I fell in love with him when I was 15, and I am 19 now. We spent 4 years apart from each other, and then he came into my life, and, one thing led to another, and now we are dating. However, I'm going to be completely honest with all of you. I don't think I was necessarily ready for a relationship, and I'll get to that in a minute. However, since then, with a lot of communication and a lot of openness, I have matured a lot within these past couple of months, and I am going strong with God more than ever. However, like I said, that wasn't always the case. You know how I said that I wasn't really ready to be in a relationship? Well, here's why. And this wasn't a realization I had until a couple weeks ago. I realized that my faith wasn't strong. I don't think it ever really was strong. I think it was just easy. I was MIA from YouTube because, like I said in my last video, I can't stand sitting here in front of all of you talking about a godly lifestyle, but me not living out that same lifestyle. And with the realization I came to, I realized that I just wasn't in the best headspace. I knew for a fact that I wasn't somebody that people should come to for advice. Truthfully, as much as I don't want to admit it, I fell so far away from God that I started actively living in sin. And it happened so fast. But I asked myself, once I started actively living in sin, why I couldn't feel the weight of sin at all. Don't get me wrong, I felt it at the beginning, but the more I invited sin in, the more all of the other sins came rushing in. Gluttony, envy, lust, lying, laziness especially. I completely stopped including God in my everyday life, and I fell so far back. And it wasn't until recently where I realized that I needed to change completely. Mind you, all of this was happening throughout my relationship as well. So not only did I have to deal with my relationship with God, but I also had to deal with my relationship and if it was honoring God or not. Now don't get me wrong, I tried picking up the Bible, I've done Bible study throughout these past couple of months, I've gone to church, but for the first time ever I was spiritually dead, full on. I made some stupid decisions. I was very sinful. And it wasn't until one night in particular where I was living out my sinful nature where I realized that I'm so far away from God. Because before it's it kind of creeps up on you. You invite sin in and you're still well, I'm a Christian. I'm not going to partake in this. And then you give in once and then you're okay, never again. Never again. I'm still a Christian. I'm still a child of God. I want to display a life that is godly. And then I gave in again. And then I was God will forgive me. And then again and again and again. Next thing I know, I am actively living in sin. The word Christian didn't even apply to me at all. Even just the term child of God did not apply to me. I am going to be completely honest with you guys and tell you that I truly was not living a godly life. I was not being a woman of God. I was not behaving the way I should have. And I actually want to take you into detail about this one specific night. It happened last month, I think, and it changed everything for me. A little backstory if you haven't heard my testimony or watched any of my other videos. I have always been somebody who has just been laid back. I was a pretty easy kid for my parents. I never snuck out, I never drank, I never gotten drunk. Sorry, I worded that weird. I never did drugs, I never slept around, I never stole, I never lied. Now don't get me wrong, there were white lies that I had said a lot. White lies that I still catch myself saying to this day. But when I'm talking about full-on lies, never did any of that. Overall, like I said, I was just pretty chill. I didn't really do anything, and it's mainly because I just didn't want to. My heart didn't desire it. I just wasn't into it. And I'm not sitting here saying all of this being like, look at me, I was so perfect, guys, like, look how perfect I was. Absolutely not. I had a lot of things I had to deal with before coming to Christ mentally. Physically, however, is a completely different thing. Mentally, I had to fix my way of thinking. I had to humble myself. I mean, everybody knows the whole spiel when you start coming into Christianity and start honoring God. You have to give up your pride, give up your ego, all of that. Or I worded that wrong. You don't have to give it up. You just need to seek God, and He will change everything. He will transform you. And you'll start obeying Him out of love and not because you feel like you need to. So mentally, I had a lot of things that I had to fix about myself or allow God to transform. Physically, though, I realized that I didn't really have any past or any way of life that I had to let go of. Coming to God was pretty, I don't want to say easy, but it wasn't really taxing physically because I already had a mindset and already had actions that adhered to God's law. And I kind of think whether I realized it or not, I kind of put myself on a pedestal. As much as I hate to admit it, there would be times where I would look at people who are living in sin with getting drunk or doing drugs or sleeping around or honestly just whatever, and I would always think, oh, I would never. Or how could they fall into that lifestyle when I've never even been tempted to have that lifestyle? And back then, if you would have asked me if I thought any of those things, I would have said no, because I don't think it was consciously, I think it was all subconsciously. But now that I have experienced a life so far from God, I can tell you with so much confidence that, yeah, I did have that mindset, and it's not a good mindset, and I'm not proud of that mindset that I had. But anyways, back to what I was saying. There was this one night in particular a month ago where I went out of town, and I had a few friends over. Some people I knew, some people I didn't know all that well, and some people I knew completely. Or I guess not completely, but they weren't strangers to me. They brought alcohol, and, we had our fun, we played games, and next thing I know, I'm drunk. Now, I would be lying if I told you that this was my first time getting drunk. I've drank it in the past, and it never seemed to really affect me. I would always cut myself off because I knew when I would be getting tipsy, or I just knew when to stop, when to call it a night. But it was never like this night. This night, I purposely chose to drink even though I didn't even want to. And for once, I gave into the peer pressure and what all of them were thinking. You see, I strayed so far from God that I stopped listening to what He says about me, and I started caring about what everybody else thought of me and said about me. So I gave in and I started drinking because I didn't want to look pathetic. And like I said, I got drunk. I started slurring my words, I started laughing at the simplest of things, and I was just a completely different person than I know myself to be. And by the way, there was a lot more to this, but I'm just saying this one night because this was the night where everything kind of changed for me. And what I mean by that is that around this time, I noticed myself getting into the habit of just drinking because I could, because there was alcohol available and I wanted to and no one was stopping me. So of course that night I gave in and, like I said, slurring my words, being ridiculous, the whole deal. But I remember very, very clearly I was sitting at the table and I was looking around at all the people around me. Some of them were drunk, some of them were tipsy, and there was one person who was completely sober. She is somebody who is 4 years older than me, and I don't know her very much, but I know that she's pretty reserved, pretty quiet, and she never really partakes in anything that me and my friends partook in. And I remember looking at her and my immediate thought was, oh my gosh, she's me. But then I took a really good look at myself and I said to myself, wow, no, I used to be her. The odd one out, the one who had no desire to drink at all. The person who just overall tried avoiding any setting like this where alcohol is available and there is peer pressuring and there is just a lot going on, a lot of sin going on, to be specific. And that's when it hit me that I was completely spiritually dead. I took a really good look at myself and I asked myself, what am I doing? Literally, what am I doing? But more importantly, why can't I feel the weight of this sin? Why could I drink so easily? Why could I give in so easily? Why didn't I even really think of God when I had my first drink? And like I said, it wasn't just this night, it was other nights too, but with other sins. Literally think of all the deadly sins, and I was so deep in all of it. Like I said, I was actively living in sin. And what was weird is that I enjoyed it. So even having this podcast, even posting the content I do, even living a life for God in the past, I still caved into this world. Because you know what? It felt like freedom. It felt so free. I felt so free. Because think about it, my whole life I was always the person who just didn't really get in trouble, didn't really rebel at all. And this was the first time where I was like, oh my gosh, I can do anything I want. I don't have to live a certain way. I don't have to act a certain way. And a weird part of me kind of fell in love with that feeling, that adrenaline. But trust me, it was not true freedom at all. And we all know this. It was a different type of freedom. The type of freedom that, yes, feels amazing at first, but you can't help but shake the feeling that there is an expiration to it. There's this specific quote, I don't know who it's from, but I heard it once and I just kind of went with it, but it describes this so perfectly, and it says that that sin feels like freedom until you're forced to give it up. Then it starts to feel like an addiction, and you start to realize that it's not freedom at all. That living in sin is honestly a trap. And it's crazy because I knew all of this. You know, I knew all of this. I knew all of it, you know? I literally have a podcast episode on here where I talk specifically of sin. By the way, all of these people who I was with, they knew that I post content. They knew that I have a Christian podcast. They knew that I go to church and that I'm super religious. They knew all of this. And that was another thing that hit me, is that they knew all of this. And then they see me getting drunk right in front of them, living actively in sin, and then going on TikTok or going on Instagram and posting about a godly lifestyle. Granted, I never posted at all when I was living in sin. I knew that wasn't right. That was the one thing that I did not do. But that's the thing. They don't see that. They don't care to see that. They care enough to judge, but they don't care enough to actually do the research. And by the way, that's no hate towards them. I completely understand. All they see is the version of me on social media, preaching about God's ways, about how to be a godly woman, all of it. And then they see the person standing in front of them getting drunk and acting ridiculous and participating in so many other sins as well. And the thing I hate the most is that my last video is pretty much the same thing I'm telling you now, where, guys, I'm falling short, I need to get back on track with God. And then after posting that, what do? I fall right into this world. Is it something I'm proud of? Absolutely not. Is it something that I feel like needed to be said? Absolutely. And I mean, you all know from the start that I'm always going to keep it honest with you guys. I'm always going to keep it real, which is why I'm not trying to sit in front of this camera and pretend to be some perfect Christian, because we all know that that's not even a thing. But the reason I'm making this video is because all of this started with my faith being weak. I said it right when this video started, is that my faith was easy. It wasn't strong. I don't think it ever was strong, because I guess I didn't have to give up a way of life. And it took me so long to actually come back to God after that horrible season of being away from Him, because for once in my life, for once in my walk with Christ, I actually felt like the sinner I, yes, always have been, but to a much bigger extent. I felt like a true sinner. Someone truly unworthy of God's grace and His love and His mercy. And although I am so not happy with my decisions and everything that I did, the way I acted, the image that I put out, honestly, I'm kind of grateful for this experience in such a weird way. Because although it destroys me, and it destroyed me, I think for once in my walk with Christ, I was truly humbled. And I think I needed that humbling. And it also made me realize the weight of my sin. But not only that, it truly made me understand why so many people find it so difficult to come to God and to hear of the Savior and to hear of his ways, but then also hearing about the sins and knowing, oh, I'm living like that right now. He's not going to want to accept me. I finally understand why people hesitate to come to God, I guess, because I completely hesitated and I almost gave up completely. And I know a lot of you guys are going to be asking, well, if you're in a relationship, your boyfriend should have led you towards God. But here's the thing is that, like I said, I was so actively living in sin to the point where I was the problem. I was the one leading my boyfriend into sin. Which is another thing that hit me, is that I kept asking him to lead me towards God, but I wasn't even leading him towards God. I was leading him directly into sin. So yeah, I have really, really evaluated myself these past couple of months, and I'm not sitting here proud of everything that happened. I really wish it didn't happen, but it did, and we can only look forward. And trust me sitting here right now saying all of this like this is completely different than just even 2 weeks ago, where I was bawling my eyes out, feeling so unworthy and feeling so far gone. I want to circle back to that night that I was talking to you all about, where I got drunk. Another realization I had was that, me acting the way that I was, having the kind of platform that I do, knowing that everybody there knew of the platform that I had, and still I acted the way that I did. It made me realize that how I'm acting, is the same exact behavior that puts a horrible reputation on Christianity. And my whole life, I never wanted to contribute to that. I always wanted to be the exception, which again kind of comes to show that I did hold myself in such high regard. But trust me, not anymore. Not anymore. But yeah, I understood that I was contributing to this horrible reputation that Christians are always trying to fight, and that I was putting out an image not just about me, but towards Christianity as a whole. And I also thought about all of you. What if somebody were to have recorded my behavior and had posted it and said, oh, this is the girl who does a Christian podcast, and she talks about God and she talks about God's ways and all of that? What am I going to say? Oh, it was a mistake? Oh, that wasn't me? No. I had no excuse. That was me. And I realized again, that's not what I want to put out there. That's not me. And so, after all of that, I asked myself, well, why was it so easy for me to live for this world when I had months of forming a relationship with God, starting all of this, being so invested in spreading his word, all of it. And I realized exactly what I said twice now in this video, is that my faith was easy and not strong. Because I even looked at my past mistakes before I started any of this, and I realized that I always gave in to sin. For the most part, I never really obeyed God wholeheartedly. Yeah, there would be times where I would fast, or there would be times where I would dedicate my mornings to him. But when it came to sin, I never fully avoided it. And I know a lot of you aren't going to be super happy hearing this, because I literally have podcast episodes talking about how to avoid lust, how to avoid sin, how to avoid, you name it. But did I ever challenge the woman of God I claim to be? Did I ever actually follow God's commands and obey him? I'm not talking about the times where it's easy. I'm talking about the times where it's hard. A lot of the time, you see the line that you can't cross. And there would be times where I would never cross it, but I would creep up to that line. I would see how far I could get to that line without stepping over it. So I'm asking all of you right now, are you following God because your faith is strong, or is it just easy? Because you hear all the time people who were actively living in sin and they turned to God. Even just look at the lives of the apostles. They were nowhere near perfect, just like all of us. But I rarely ever heard somebody who never really lived a sin-packed life turning to God because it was easy, but then realizing that, oh, I'm following God because it's easy. I don't feel called out on a lot of things. I don't have a way of life that I had to give up. And then falling into sin and living out that sinful life and realizing that, oh yeah, you're not all that perfect as you thought you were. You are a sinner just like everybody else. Just because you don't sin as much doesn't mean that God views you lower down on the sinner scale. So in conclusion, what have I learned? I learned to humble the heck out of myself. I learned that even if I don't feel like a true sinner, I am always going to be one. I learned that I need to strengthen my faith completely, devote my life to God. And I learned that just because you live or used to live quote unquote good doesn't earn you any points. Works alone do not give you a golden ticket into heaven. It's by faith. And do not misunderstand me when I say that. Of course, we need both works and faith. But I'm saying that if you were like me, or if you are like me, or I guess how I was, and you thought that, I don't know, keeping a record of how many times you didn't sin drastically makes you more equipped for heaven than all the other sinners, it does not. It's crazy too, because you hear it all the time. It's all over the Bible, but it doesn't fully hit you until you are face to face with it and that reality. So yes, I fell short, but I learned a lot, I matured a lot, and I realized that I always need God continually and consistently in my life. And even though I fell away from Him, He has blessed me so abundantly in my life lately. So, I was spiritually dead, but God saved me yet again, and I'm here to tell you that this time I am here to stay for good. And like I said in the very beginning of this episode, don't take my word for it, but allow me to prove it to all of you. I'm done making excuses, and I'm done meeting God halfway. So, I know the past 2 episodes I've talked only about me. I'm sorry, it's gonna stop. But I will see you next episode, and that will be on free will. Thank you, Jesus, for bringing me back home. I'm not going to say that I am never going to fall short again. I definitely am. But I never want to fall back to the extent that I did ever again. So, if you ask me, yes, I already started this podcast, but today truly starts this podcast. No more lukewarm faith, no more weak faith, and no more excuses. I love you all so much, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Late Nights with Christ. As always, there is a prayer in the description box down below, and I will see you this weekend for episode 10 of Late Nights with Christ. Ciao.